Alright guys, welcome back to another Pokemon video. Today, I'm going to be doing a top 10 decks video for Journey Together. Of course, this is also going to be for post-rotation. So if you're looking to know what's good post-rotation with the new set, and you're looking to put together some decks, maybe get some testing going on, you come to the right place. So let's just get right into it with the number one deck. I'm going to be counting number one down. I just think it makes a little more sense because in order to kind of understand why some of the decks aren't very good, you need to know which decks are good. So starting off with number one here, it's going to be Tera Box. I think this shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone who's been looking at the Japanese tournaments, the Fukuoka Champions League, I believe it was. So of course, this Tera Box deck is really strong, mostly because Manaphy has rotated, which makes Wellspring Mask Ogerpon a complete force. And then you also have Noctowl for consistency, where a lot of other decks' consistency engines have rotated, right? All the V Pokemon, Rotom V, Lumineon V with the Forest Seal Stone, all the Arven decks have gotten a lot weaker, so it makes this Noctowl engine a little better. Of course, one big weakness of the deck is Farigiraf EX, and we'll get to that shortly after this. But let's take a look at this Tera Box deck. A lot of different attacking options. Of course, the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon is going to shut down a lot of evolution decks, right? If you're trying to play Charizard, you're trying to play Dragapult or Feraligatr, really any evolution deck, even other Noctowl decks, this Wellspring Mask Ogerpon can be pretty vicious against. And then, of course, we've also got the Pikachu. That's going to help out against more of your big basic type decks, maybe something like a Raging Bolt or Miraidon, or really those are the main ones you're looking for. Also, Archaludon is pretty notable. It's got the Clefairy in there that just one-shots Dragapult for 2 energies, so that gets around pretty much the only viable Pokemon with over 300 HP. So you got Pikachu to kill everything with 300 HP or less. Dragapult is an exception. You got the Clefairy, and then you got the Water Mask Ogerpon for the 1 prize options. Round the deck out with a couple efficient attackers, the Terapagos, the Blood Moon. Just good to close games out. These attackers are a little bit demanding, right? You got to play some Crispins, some energy switches in order to get off like a Pikachu attack, or also the Water Mask attack can be a little difficult, but and I guess I forgot to mention, but Teal Mask Ogerpon is also a viable attacker. Sometimes it's just the easiest thing to set up. Doesn't require any E-switches and hits for that grass weakness, which comes up against Charizard and Zoroark as well. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we've got Walls, and a lot of people are going to be kind of upset to see this, but this Wall Stall deck is actually very good. I guess it's not really a stall deck. It does attack. Well, maybe stall a bit and then you attack, but in the strengths column, pretty much like half the meta is there. Tera Box, you see at the second deck there in the strengths column. Farigiraf EX kind of just walls that deck out pretty hard. Of course, Farigiraf blocking basic EX Pokemon. If you're playing Tera Box and you want to be beating this wall stall deck, there are a couple options. I think my favorite option is to play a Cornerstone Ogerpon and a Fighting Energy. That way you can just attack through the Farigiraf. You can also recover it, get it back, keep doing it. So I think if you're looking to beat this wall deck, that's what you got to do. But anyways, this deck, Milotic, of course, is going to hard wall Dragapult. The Farigiraf also going to wall out Raging Bolt. And then there's also a Cornerstone, which is going to wall out the Zoroark and Charizard decks. Now, this deck does have some weaknesses. Of course, it is beating a lot of those top decks, and we can take a look at the list here. But there are some decks that you just don't beat, right? Something like a Feraligatr, pretty much anything that doesn't rely solely on a Tera or a basic EX Pokemon or Pokemon with abilities, right? It's going to cause you a lot of trouble. You could lose to like some random deck that isn't even on this tier list. Also, Archaludon is not a particularly good matchup, but taking a look here, pretty straightforward deck, pretty straightforward build. You're going to notice a theme with most of my deck lists on this tier list. They're all very streamlined. I think when you're going into a rotation, a really new meta, you don't really know what's going on. It's best to just start out with a consistent deck list, test some games, and then once you maybe can see some of the weaknesses of your deck, maybe you want to start putting in tech cards like Counter Catcher. The list from Fukuoka had a counter gain, but I really just like starting out with something simple. You notice that there's bulkier lines of all the evolutions, right? 3-3 Milotic, 3-3 Farigiraf. You want to be able to set up 2 of them with TM Evolution, right? Maybe if one's in your hand or one's in the prizes. I think the Fukuoka League lists were playing like a 2-2 Farigiraf or maybe a 3-2. It just felt a little thin to me, so bulked up those counts. Got the Monkey Dory in here as well with the Pokevital A for a lot of healing. Right, against a lot of decks, they're going to be using crappy attackers against you. If you're playing against Tera Box, maybe they're attacking with like Fan Rotom or Noctowl. If you're attacking against Dragapult, maybe they're going to hit you with the Pheasantipede, or maybe attack you with a Drake Cloak, right? All these decks just kind of do like really mediocre damage. And so it's nice to be able to heal that off so that you don't get like 3-shot by a Pheasantipede, for example. So Monkey Dory's in there, the Pokevital. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for the deck. For Crispin to set up your attackers. There's a Super Rod in the deck. That's like pretty much the only tech card in here. I don't really know if it's necessary, but it's just kind of in there in case you need to like research away a Farigiraf on turn 1 and you got to get it back. So I could see that Super Rod being kind of trash, but otherwise I think this deck is really, really solid. Coming in at number 3, I've got Raging Bolt. I mean, Raging Bolt has been a staple of the standard format for a long time, and it didn't lose any critical pieces heading into the next format. So we're pairing it up with Noctowl now to get some extra consistency. Of course, we are losing Lumineon V, so we can't like Lumineon for our Sadas anymore. So kind of helpful to be able to Noctowl for it. A big strength of this deck is that it destroys Archaludon. You just one-shot it, no problem, no questions asked. As far as weaknesses go, one prize strategies, right? That's going to be like Feraligatr. There's some like Froslass strategies going on, but for the most part, these one prize strategies aren't very viable. So that's not too big an issue. Farigiraf EX is a weakness of this deck. We talked about the wall stall deck. Of course, lots of basic EX Pokemon in this deck. I have included an answer to the wall stall deck in this Raging Bolt list, which we'll get to in a second, but the last weakness is going to be Pikachu EX. The deck does not really have a way to deal with a Pikachu EX from Tera Box. You can't one-shot it, and it's just going to rip through all of your Raging Bolts. So taking a look at the list here, we saw at the Champions League Fukuoka, this one prize Raging Bolt saw some success. I think Slitherwing might be a little bit better. As I was making this tier list, I kind of thought about that because, the Slitherwing applies burn, so you can actually one-shot a Pikachu EX. Well, I mean, you kill it with the burn, which is very nice, which also doesn't activate Pheasantipede. So I think the Slitherwing might be a little bit better than this Raging Bolt, but this Raging Bolt is also an answer to something like a Farigiraf EX, right? That second attack, I don't really know what it's called. It's kind of blocked there. Dragon Headbutt, maybe. No, that's Dragapult. I don't know, but it does 130 for 3 energies, right? So that's going to be enough damage to apply some pressure on those Farigiraf EX. You can also get in there with Fan Rotom. So I think this deck has a little bit of a stronger plan against the Milotic Farigiraf deck than something like the Tera Box, which is nice. Otherwise, something you'll notice in this list is that it's really lacking gust effects, right? The old Raging Bolt lists were a little more turbo, right? You had that Radiant Greninja. You would, I don't know, maybe it was just the Radiant Greninja, but now we're playing Noctowl, so it's really hard to also fit in Pokemon catchers. You also don't really want to be using Noctowl to get the Pokemon catchers. And anyways, we're just rocking one Prime Catcher, one Boss. I feel like that could be an issue for this Raging Bolt deck. Maybe something like an Iron Bundle could be another valuable inclusion, but otherwise we've just got all the consistency Pokemon. Latias EX has made its way into the deck. Another thing is that this deck is a little bit weak to something like a Sob, right? The Tera Box deck plays 2 of those Water Mask Ogerpons, so there's going to be a switch in the deck as well. Even though you got the Latias and the Prime Catcher, it is nice to have some additional switching options. Coming in at number 4, I have Archaludon. I haven't really heard too many people talk about this deck, but I don't really see a reason why this deck isn't good. I think it actually has a strong Tera Box matchup, and I think it has a strong wall matchup as well. As far as the weaknesses go, Raging Bolt, of course, is really bad. Pikachu EX is also an issue, but we'll get to my list in a second. I've got a solution for that. And then also Feraligatr is an issue. You just don't trade very well. The Feraligatr can one-shot you with some Monkey Dories. You don't like Mimikyu is a little bit annoying, but taking a look at the list, it's a little experimental right now, but I've got Rigid Bands in the deck. That's going to be protecting the Archaludon from Pikachu EX, specifically against Tera Box. I could see a world where you play way more than 2 Rigid Bands. You could play 3 or even 4 of these. I've got the Dunsparce in the deck, making the deck a little more consistent. something I've really been noticing as I play games in the new format. Without Lumineon V in the format, Ultra Ball is often actually kind of a dead card. And so being able, when you have 4 Ultra Ball, being able to turn an Ultra Ball and to draw 3 cards is actually pretty good. Of course, you can't like Lumineon for research, which would be way better. You get 7 cards, but for example, you have your Ultra Ball and maybe you need to find a Rigid Band and you don't play to Dunsparce, well, that Ultra Ball is not going to help you. So otherwise, we've got Monkey Dory. I've been thinking about this card a lot in Archaludon, even pre-rotation. Maybe it's just because I've been a Gardevoir enjoyer, but Monkey Dory is really, really strong. There's a lot of Pokemon with like 230 HP, right? Those basic EXs, stuff like Terapagos EX, Raging Bolt EX is another good example where you just barely can't kill them. And so, especially against like Terapagos EX, right? They put some damage on you, you can send it back. Also really good against Pikachu EX, right? Even with the Rigid Band, like they could hit you for 270. You can heal off your Monkey Dory, and then you can kill that Pikachu. So that's kind of why the Monkey Dory is in here. Just trying it out. Might be a little too hard to pull off, right? Your opponent could probably get a little tactical and just not put damage on your board, but right now it's something I'm trying out. Otherwise, pretty streamlined deck list. We've got Artisan for the stadium now. No need to really be playing Jamming Towers anymore. Gardevoir has kind of fallen out of the meta, which was really why the deck was playing 4 Jamming Towers pre-rotation. And then just round out the deck. 4 Earthen Vessels is something I will call out. The deck did lose Radiant Greninja. And so I've seen some lists in the Japanese city leagues playing like 3 vessels, and I don't really like that. I think you got to get these energies and get them in the discard. Coming in at number 5, we've got Feraligatr. Now, when I initially looked at this deck, I thought it was like the biggest meme ever. But the more I thought about it, and I've actually picked it up and played a couple games, this deck is surprisingly good. It has a couple consistency issues sometimes. There's not a lot of draw support in the deck, but if you look at the strength column of this deck, pretty much all of the meta is a good matchup, right? Against Dragapult, you've got Milotic. Against Raging Bolt, you're just a really strong one-prize strategy. Against walls, I mean, you just destroy walls. They just don't do anything to you, and you just one-shot them, no problem. And Archaludon as well, just trading really well into all these 2-prize decks. The Tera Box matchup is a little bit concerning, and I guess I probably should have put consistency in that issue or weaknesses column, but this is just the list from the Champions League Fukuoka, the champion list, of course. And I've been kind of wondering if Precious Trolley is the way to go. I think if you're gonna play the Precious Trolley, this list makes a lot of sense. I think it's very cohesive in the way it sets up. You got the Pokegears because you got to find your Arven. I guess you could like play Call Bell, but that sounds bad. Don't do that. But I was trying to like find a way for this deck to not play Precious Trolley. I think something like an Unfair Stamp would be really nice, or even like a Secret Box. I just hate playing Precious Trolley. You know, the whole deck is really reliant on it. When you prize that Precious Trolley, it really hurts. But as far as the deck's core strategy goes, there's a few things going on here. You've got that kind of hit and run strategy with the Croconaw. You can use that while you're kind of setting up your Feraligatrs, right? You can go into Mimikyu against some of these EX-focused decks. Pretty strong against Tera Box, pretty strong against Raging Bolt, pretty strong against even the Wall Stall decks to just like shove a Mimikyu in the active. You've also got the Bidoof, again on theme of just trying to buy time, set up your Feraligatrs, set up your Monkey Dories, get the Dark Energies into play, and then eventually you can come in with your Feraligatr, and I think the attack is called Giant Wave, and you do 280, you get some Monkey Dory pings involved, and you're one-shotting everything in the format. Something else I'll call out here is that Totodile has Corner or Tempting Trap, Sob, whatever you want to call it. Your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. I find this to be a pretty effective strategy versus the Tera Box deck. And the other thing that this deck has going for it with that Sob strategy or the Corner or whatever, the no retreat, is the ability to use Monkey Dory, right? So you can have your Feraligatr with the Relicanth be using Big Bite, and you can pump up the damage, and then you can put some damage on yourself, of course, and then Monkey Dory and put the damage on the bench. Additionally, you can just have like your Totodile in the active. Say you're trapping something that you don't want to die, right? You're trapping like, I don't know, your opponent's Squawkabilly or something. you don't want to pump your damage, right? So you do 10 with your Totodile. You've got your Feraligatr on the bench. Every turn, you just use your Feraligatr's ability. Then you use double Monkey Dory to like put the damage on the bench somewhere. So this deck has a really effective trapping strategy in a format where, you know, block lacks rotated. So these decks are a little bit less prepared for this trapping strategy. I mean, you would have seen the Tera Box deck. I think it only has one Turo, at least if you're copying towards list, which I imagine most people will be. You just got one Turo, so you know you big bite like a Noctowl, and then you big bite another Noctowl, and you basically win the game. Noctowl does 60 damage a turn. Your Monkey Dories can heal that full 60 damage every turn, and then you just like eventually kill everything on the bench with Monkey Dory. So pretty cool deck. I'm excited to play more with this deck. Oh, and I guess one other thing I should mention is that against Dragapult, you're just TM Evoing into 2 Milotics and then like attacking with the Milotics, or you can like hit and run into the Milotic as well. You're really just looking to have this Milotic put in work. One other thing I was considering with this deck was cutting the Crispin. Probably the most underwhelming card in the deck. It's completely unsearchable, so you just kind of have to have it when you need it, which is just doesn't really happen. But currently, I'm still playing with it, mostly because it helps you set up those Milotics against Dragapult. Manually attaching 3 times can be a little bit slow, so we've got the Crispin in there for now. Coming in at number 6, I have Dragapult. A lot of people have been playing this deck in post-rotation in City Leagues and the Champions League and whatnot. I don't really see why this deck is good. I think your Tera Box matchup is not particularly good, right? They can like water Wellspring Mask and like kill your whole bench. It doesn't have a good Milotic EX matchup, like the Wall Stall deck. It doesn't have a good Raging Bolt matchup. And then a bunch of random decks can just like play Clefairy EX. I mean, really, the Clefairy EX is going in Tera Box, but like, you know, you could play against like a Gardevoir deck that just like plays Clefairy, or maybe this card's not super splashable because it needs Psychic Energy. But Clefairy EX, of course, does one-shot Dragapult, which is an issue. Taking a look at a list, I've been experimenting a little bit with the Dunsparce in Dragapult. I found the consistency of this deck to be lacking a little bit without Lance, so I've tried to replace the Lance with Hyper Aroma, kind of similar to the way like some Gardevoir decks have played in the past with the Hyper Aroma. It's going to be replacing the Lance, and then that works well with the Dunsparce because sometimes you don't have like a ton of Dracloaks or Dreepies, so I got some Dunsparces in there along with the Dunsparce EX, which I think provides a viable answer against the Wall Stall deck, specifically against Milotic, right? Say your opponent's got 2 Milotics, maybe they've got 3 Milotics, right? Your Dunsparce is doing 120, 180 damage, you know, Defiance Band. You're going to be 2-shotting these Milotics. You can get some Dusknors involved there as well if you need to. And of course, it's got 270 HP. So I think that provides both a little bit of draw power and also a nice answer to this Wall Stall deck. Otherwise, you're just like attacking with Pheasantipity, which is not particularly good. Something else I've been wondering with this deck is like if Arven is even the way to play it anymore. With the Hyper Aroma, I think it makes a lot of sense, but like without Luminion and Forest Sealstone, Arven just feels significantly weaker than it used to. So I could see these Dragapult decks just switching to some kind of like Professor Research draw engine. Yeah, I haven't tried it at all, but just a thought that I had. Coming in at number 7, and at this point, I will say that the power level of these decks does significantly drop off. Even the Dragapult deck, I think, had a drop off from Feraligatr. I really think those top 5 decks are cut above the rest, especially in these post-rotation formats. That is usually the way of it. Less cards is going to mean less good decks, but I will talk about the Zoroark deck. I think it has some solid traits going for it. Of course, no mana fee is an asset for this Darmanitan. Of course, the Darmanitan just shoots 2 Pokemon for 90 damage. Now, that's cool, but also, like, why not just use the Water Mask Ogerpon to do that? I think it's a little easier to do so, and then you can also incorporate some stronger strategies in your deck with the Water Mask, right? This deck has a 210 damage cap, right? Your Reshiram does 170, then you can use Binding Mochi to do 40 more, or like I guess you could play Max Belt, but you get the idea. You're never really killing something like a Dragapult EX or an Archaludon, or even really a Raging Bolt can be kind of hard to deal with sometimes. But the one strength of the deck, of course, is trade. For those of you that played the game back in maybe 2017 or 18, no, 2019 maybe back then. I don't know. Zoroark GX, of course, trade is a little nostalgic for some of us. Taking a look at the list here. This is just the list from the Champions League Fukuoka. I haven't put too much time into this deck personally because I don't think it's particularly good, but it's got the Pecharunt EX. I think that's a great inclusion for mobility with the Binding Mochi just to get some additional damage output. It's also rocking an Arven engine, which I'm also kind of underwhelmed by, but it makes sense. It helps you find the Mochi, and I guess you have TM Evolution, which is kind of nice, but I'm honestly just like really low on Arven as a card in post rotation. I think there's a lot of opportunity for just like a research based deck to be a little bit stronger. But of course, searching cards is typically better than trying to draw into them. There's a lot of luck involved with a research and a little less luck involved with an Arven. That's all I really have to say about this deck. It's cool, but I think Tera Box is kind of just better. At number 8, I have Archaludon. I saw this deck popping up in the city leagues over in Japan. I thought it was really cool. We can just take a look at the list. I think it's just like worse than normal Archaludon, but it's really funny. The idea here is that similar to Cloth, right? You've got the Brute Bonnet, the Pecharunt, and on turn 1, you need to find a Perilous Jungle. That's going to make your poison do 2 more. You got your Pecharunt. That's going to make it do 5 more. So that's plus 7. And then the original 1. So I think you do 80 damage total with the poison. That's going to let you donk like all the basics, right? Something like Hoot Hoots, Dreepies, Zoruas, I guess Dunsparces, Fanrotoms, lots of Pokemon that you can just kind of donk with this deck, and people won't really be ready for it. We've seen Cloth kind of exit the meta. So I think, if you're going to your locals, this is a great deck to just pull up with. Maybe get some donks in there. Looks pretty fun to me. Of course, you also like have an Archaludon in the deck. I think that's just kind of like an efficient attacker, right? You go for this like donk strategy. If you don't get there, you just like attack with Archaludon for 220 and hope that gets you there. You've got the Binding Mochis, which work well with the Brute Bonnet, of course, letting you do 260. So you can actually do 280, right? You can do 220, 40 more with the Mochi, 260, poison, and then plus 20 from the Perilous Jungle. That's 290. A little bit of a less relevant number nowadays. Of course, all the Pokemon V-Star have rotated out of the game. And so you're like way overkilling something like a Raging Bolt, but you're not quite killing something like a Dragapult EX. But I thought this deck was really cool, and I wanted to include it in my tier list. Coming in at number 9, we've got Froslass. I've got a buddy who has been a long-time Froslass enjoyer. I think this deck is pretty solid. It's got some good matchups into the top decks. Of course, Raging Bolt doesn't really deal with this very well. Lots of decks setting up lots of Noctowls, right? Tera Box, also one of those decks. This deck also blows Wall Stall out of the water, right? Most of the all of the Pokemon in their deck have abilities. And so you're going to be able to pile up damage on their board really, really well. Some weaknesses, I think Dragapult is a pretty big weakness. It doesn't have an ability. It has a really efficient attack, and it kind of just rips your board apart. And then, of course, Archaludon for similar reasons. Just massive HP. They've got several Turos and a really efficient attack. Because this deck is going to be relying on Badoo a lot of the time to slow your opponent down while you set up those dark energies on the Monkey Dories, evolve into your Frostlasses. Something else to note here, we've got the Maractus. That Maractus just has that retreat locking attack, right? Your Mawile or whatever just says your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. We've got the Espathra EX in here. I thought that was really cool. I think it makes sense. It's in here to block something like a Water Mask Ogerpon attack, right? If you are able to get an Espathra up quickly, it's going to make that Hydro Cannon. I don't know what the attack's called, but it's going to make that Water Mask attack cost 4 energies, a lot harder than 3. And so that's what that's in there for. It's also going to be blocking a lot of other efficient attacks, something like a Dragapult EX attack, even like a Raging Bolt attack can kind of be blocked a little bit by that Espathra, just buying time for your Monkey Dories and your Frostlasses to build up damage. We've also got the Gravity Gemstone in here. I think that's a really good inclusion, right? You could like bring up something with a 1 retreat cost, toss a Gravity Gemstone onto your Badoo and Itchy Pollen, right? Your opponent can't play something like a switch. They can only attach 1 energy per turn. The double colorless energy has rotated, so there won't be any retreating with that. So I think that's a really solid inclusion. Again, buying time for that Froslass to build up damage. And then, of course, to close out games, we've got the 2 TM Devolution, just to like wipe your opponent's massive EX Pokemon off the board, right? Your Dragapult EX, your End Zoroark, your Archaludon. But I guess the little Archaludons have a lot of HP too. And then, of course, we've also got the Blood Moon. So if you don't feel like using TM Devolution, maybe you've got 90 damage or so on a Dragapult EX, you can just come in with the Blood Moon at the end of the game and close it out. I'm definitely going to have a lot of fun with this deck. Might play it over to Kansan Games at one of my League tournament ride-along videos, so stay tuned for that. And then at number 10, I was really grasping at straws here for a 10th deck. Like I mentioned earlier, in these post-rotation formats, there are just less viable decks. So I've got this Flareon Noctowl deck. Don't mind the weaknesses column, but I think this deck is pretty cool. It is probably just a worse version of Tera Box, just less options and slightly less strong attacks than something like a Pikachu EX, but if you're an EV enjoyer, I think this deck is probably the most competitively viable an evolution deck has been in a long time. Probably since like Vespiquen Flareon from like 2016, 2017 or so. But anyways, we've got the Noctowl engine, like I mentioned before. This Noctowl engine is really going to be like the premier engine of the format, right? Like I said, the Arven engine was significantly weakened by the rotation. Noctowl engine wasn't. So we've got 4/4 Noctowl, we've got our evolutions. Now, I think there's also some room for this evolution deck to be kind of improved upon. You know, I'd love to see something like the Sylveon EX come into the deck. Maybe the Espeon EX could come in here, give you some more powerful options. Maybe some more Ionos. You could play a little bit more of a comeback strategy. But this version of the deck really focused on just attacking with Flareon. You do 120. You can accelerate energies with that attack, and then you do 280. So just going to be knocking out things like Raging Bolts and Zoroark. Maybe a Hopsization can get knocked out by that first attack from the Flareon. And then something else that's pretty notable here is that Leafeon EX, a solid inclusion. Its attack for 3 energies heals 100 damage from all your Pokemon. So something like a Froslass deck is just going to get completely destroyed by that. Maybe something like a Dragapult deck, also pretty unhappy to see that happen. This deck would probably actually be pretty solid into Dragapult. But that's going to be it for this tier list. If you have any other decks that you've been enjoying, please put them in the comment section down below. I'll be trying out everything, trying to learn this rotation. Let me know what decks you guys want to see in future videos. And other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one.